Okay, we're going to answer the really great question of how do you make stuffing, the kind of stuffing that's served traditionally in America for Thanksgiving type meals. I love to eat it all year round, but I can never get anybody to make it. So I'm going to show you a recipe that is certainly my favorite recipe of all the stuffings I've ever had, and there have been many. For example, and I'm going to tell you a quick story because it has to do with why we're doing this stuffing recipe today. Once was a judge at a stuffing contest for a large paper in Chicago, and the public brought about 100 different stuffing recipes in, and we had the blind taste all of these stuffings, me and two other judges. And the funny thing is, we all decided, blind tasting, no discussion between the judges, on one stuffing as the best one. And we all also chose what the second and third winners were without talking to each other. Now, you figure that one out, and I'm going to tell you how and why we figured it out. The winner tasted like stuffing. The rest of them, although good, didn't do the stuffing thing for you. We had livers and blueberries and nuts and all kinds of different fruits and you name it, and different vegetables and different kinds of stuffings. But the one that we really liked was the one that tasted like stuffing. So this formula right here, and I have all of the ingredients for this stuffing here. And Richard, if you can come down, I want to go through the ingredients for this stuffing first. And there's a couple of things about these ingredients that I think are fairly important. One of them is that the ingredients are cut in such a way so that you have pieces of the ingredients within the stuffing when you're done, which I'll show you later as the stuffing gets completed. But the mushrooms, for example, are cut into pieces. They're not cut up real thin like this because they have a tendency to disappear into the stuffing, and you can't, I don't know, I kind of like the idea of being able to eat a piece of mushroom at will while you're eating the stuffing and select which part of the stuffing you want to eat at one time. So I have the mushrooms cut up, and I have celery cut up in that size also. So they're going to shrink a little bit when you cook them anyway. But the celery is, if I can get some room here, is cut in pieces that are big enough so that you'll be able to identify the celery within the stuffing, okay? So we have mushrooms, we have celery, and we have onion. Those are the three primary veg that are in traditional American stuffing. Now I cut the onion like this. So there'll be pieces of onion. Now, of course, the onion takes the longest to cook, and so that would be the one item that you probably start cooking first. Now, there's a couple of things about making stuffing that are very important to understand. Obviously, if you want sage stuffing, we have some fresh sage, and I chopped some of the fresh sage, and we're going to use fresh sage in it. You certainly can use the dried Dalmatian sage. Now, we have dried leaf thyme, which works very well, and we have fresh thyme, which is a little bit tedious to clean and chop, but you can take your thyme leaves off and then you chop them up, or don't chop them. In the case of stuffing, you don't have to. So, and we have garlic, and we have butter. And we have a little bit of our turkey stock or chicken stock, whatever you happen to have. If you're making a turkey stock and you're doing this for a Thanksgiving type meal, then you'll have some turkey stock laying around. But either one will work fine, all right? So, again, I want to go over the ingredients that are in the entire stuffing recipe. Butter, small amounts of garlic, which is I didn't mention to you yet, but I'm telling you now. And I want to emphasize to you that you cannot put too much garlic in stuffing. There's a lot of things that you can put more garlic in than may be required without having them come out in a way that people aren't going to like. But garlic and stuffing, you have to be very careful with, okay? And, of course, the amount of sage. So the entire ingredients for the bread stuffing is the bread. Now, what I did was, and I have a sheet pan of bread cut up here. I am using, and I always use, the same kind of bread for my stuffing, and that is thin, white, sliced sandwich bread. I'm making this recipe out of one loaf, which is about 22 slices of bread, give or take, 21, 23, 24, but the average is about 22. Now, I'm cutting the bread in this size piece. First, I'm cutting the bread in half that way, and then I'm cutting it into sixths, okay? And that is the size of the bread. Now, I'm going to go back. All right, let me finish going over the ingredients. So the total ingredients for the stuffing, this is very important. People have a tendency to want to put all kinds of stuff into their stuffing, and if you try this recipe, you will find it. You don't need anything else. It's mushroom, onion, celery, sage, a little bit of thyme, a little bit of garlic, whole unsalted butter, and a little bit of stock. Now, I'm going to cut from this scene. I'm going to take you over to the stove. I'm going to toast the bread right now by popping it in the oven. So we're going to open up in a second with toasted bread, and we're going to saute all of these items in separate pans, which is important because they all have a different amount of cooking time. And we're going to dump them all together and roll them up and put them in another pan to bake in the oven, okay? So let's go over to the stove. All right, we're at the stove, which is where all the action always takes place anyway. It's, you know, we do things at the prep table, but we don't really do the cooking until we get over by the stove most of the time. So if you'll come down here, Richard, real quick into the stove, we'll talk about the sauteing of the vegetables for the stuffing. I have 3 pans here, and I put a little bit of whole unsalted butter in each one. And we're going to cook mushrooms in one. We're going to cook celery in another. And we're going to cook the onions in another one. All right. Now, the celery and the mushrooms are going to cook quickly. And the onions are going to take a little more time. We're going to time-elapse the cooking of the onions, but I'm going to show you how to get them started and what they look like when they're done. Now, in each one of these cases, being careful with the salt, of course, I'm going to put a little bit of salt and pepper. On all 3. You got to remember one thing about your stuffing. When it bakes, it condenses a little bit. So you don't want to get it too properly seasoned, so to speak, or completely seasoned before you bake it, because it might condense and end up being a little more salty. We're going to put a little bit of fresh chopped sage in each one of these. So this is our sage, traditional American dressing with sage. Now, you don't want to over-sage this stuff either, so you want to be careful about that. And we're going to put a little bit of garlic in all 3. Being careful, we don't want too much garlic in this stuff. You notice I'm not using a lot of garlic there. And we're going to put a little bit of dried leaf thyme in each one. Not too much. You don't want this thing, your stuffing, tasting like dried thyme or fresh thyme, whichever one you're choosing to use, okay? I'm going to put a little bit more butter. Mushrooms have a tendency to absorb butter. They're up there with eggplant. A little bit more butter in all 3 of these. Okay. Now, real quick, I'm going to take the toasted bread that I toasted in the oven. You don't want to over toast it. It's got some soft spots on it, and that's good. And I'm going to dump it in a larger container here because we're going to have to mix all of the ingredients together. Now, the mushroom, that's cooked enough for me. I'm going to dump it over the bread. Okay. Celery is going to take a little bit more time. And the onions. And now remember one thing else about you cooking your veg. You're not interested in browning them to death, okay? Now, in the case of the onion, I'm going to add a little bit of stock to it, because it's going to need to cook. You want your onions to be soft when they go into the stuffing. The celery and the mushroom, keeping in mind now that we're going to be re-baking the stuffing. This is the preliminary preparation prior to the baking process. When these onions are done, and we have the onion and the celery in here, we may moisten this with a little bit more of this chicken stock that I have here. But there's a couple of tricks there too, because you don't want your dressing being soggy when it's done. And the baking process itself, I'm going to add a little bit of chicken stock to the celery also. The baking process itself has a tendency to moisturize the bread. So we don't want it to get it too moist at this stage. And I'll show you when the onions are finally done how moist it should be when you're packing it into the casserole that you're going to bake it into, okay? So the celery is cooked enough for me, and it's nice and green. It's not going to stay that way, of course, but you'll notice I got a little bit of stock in there. You could cook it a little more, but I don't think I need to. So I'm going to dump that also over the bread. And now all we have is the onion here. And I'm going to turn that onion down a little bit. Add just a pinch more stock to it. And we're going to come back in a minute when the onion's done. And it's probably going to take 5-10 minutes. You want to turn it down, cook it slow until the onion is nice and soft and ready to eat. Then we'll dump it on there. We'll mix it all up. We'll take a couple pieces of bread. We'll taste them. We'll see if we like the way it tastes. Then we'll pack it in the casserole and bake it off in the oven. Now, in terms of getting ready for your dinner, one of the things you can do is you can make the stuffing up to the point that we will have it before we put it into the oven, and you can put it in your fridge the day before. So on the day of the meal, all you have to do is take it out and pop it in the oven. So this preliminary part is what we're doing right now. I'm going to add a little more stock to it. It's sucking up a lot of stock, but I'm getting it turned down here slowly. So you want to cook this a little bit slower now, because we're not trying to boil the onions to death. So I'll be back in a few minutes when the onions are cooked and nice and soft, and I'll show you what those look like before we add them to the stuffing. We'll be right back.